The world before the earth and sky were created was the ocean. And where the goddess of the ocean dwells, there is an island blessed by her hands, known as Santinare. The virtue held most high here is beauty above all, or la bella figura. As beauty is everything, every night, extravagance and pleasure are chased like stars in the sky. But even in a place like this, there exists a cesspool where all manner of appalling things end up. Gomorrah. The slums. The first scene shows a youth who has been cornered by 4 grown men. They call the young lad all sorts of names and threaten him because of a conversation they overheard. The first man addresses the cornered youth as Abele and accuses him of not being mute at all. He grabs him by the collar and the young lad screams for the older man to get his hands off him. The other 3 men burst into mocking laughter as they realize that the youth who had been posing as a boy is really a girl. Suddenly, the look in their eyes changes as they give her body a once-over. One of the men says that, while the young lady's face may be revolting, her body is quite tantalizing. He tries to touch her, and she slaps his hand away, screaming for him to get away from her. When the man tries to retaliate, she pulls out a broken shard of glass and points it at him, threatening to use it if he comes any closer. The first man gets angry and slams her against the wall. He tells her that he took pity on her for being an orphan, and that she is an ungrateful little rat. As she falls to her knees and coughs, the glass falls from her hand and shatters to the ground. The man continues speaking, saying that he previously felt bad for her because she has been trying to make ends meet as a shoe shiner. However, he says she leaves him with no choice. So he smacks her hard across the face and then proceeds to give her an ultimatum: 1 week to pay the protection fee she owes. He threatens that if she can't pay within that time, she will have to deal with his men's fists instead of just the shoes on their feet. The men turn around to leave, laughing among themselves, and the unlucky youth looks after them with resentment in her eyes. A few days later at San Selena Plaza, the scene is set in an open area where 2 men are seated and our shoe shiner girl is working. Her client has his face buried in a newspaper while she polishes his shoes, lost in her thoughts. She's worried and confused about what to do because she has only 2 days left since her last encounter in the slums. She thinks about how to come up with the money she owes, appalled by the idea of being forced into a brothel if she fails to pay it back. If it comes to that, she tells herself she would rather die. At that moment, her client repeats those words out loud, lowering the paper he has been reading all along. He says he would rather die before having to walk down the aisle with a woman named Lucrezia. Our shoeshine girl looks up at the sound of his voice and freezes for a moment. The man's face is strikingly familiar, and she wonders if he could be Cesare Bonaparte. She glances at the Santinare daily newspaper, which states that the most high-ranking member of the Bonaparte family, embroiled in countless scandals, has finally met his destined match. The lady in question is the youngest daughter of the House of Della Valle, Lucrezia Della Valle. She has drawn the attention of the entire island by demanding that she be betrothed to the House of Bonaparte's only successor, Cesare. Based on a marriage pledge made long ago between the 2 families, everyone is congratulating Lucrezia on finally achieving her one-sided love. Yet Cesare, the betrothed in question, seems to think otherwise. He calls the newspaper a load of nonsense and states that they have no idea what Lucrezia is really like. Our shoeshine girl continues to stare at him, and this time she knows for certain that he is Cesare Bonaparte. She can't believe she's seeing such a renowned person in the town plaza, and she wonders what she should do. She considers telling him about her situation and asking for help, thinking that he might take pity on her and toss her a few gold coins. Cesare tells his companion, Guido, that he has to put his plan into action. His friend asks if it's the harebrained scheme he has in mind and calls him unserious for considering such a plan. Caesar asserts that he doesn't have a better option. He needs to find a decent-looking girl and sell her off to the Della Valle family. The eyes of their shoeshiner glint as she understands the implications. She realizes she could get much more than just a few gold coins out of this. This could be the last chance granted to her by the heavens. So, she looks up and asks Cesare to sell her. She claims she will become the most valuable lady in all of Santinare. He looks down at her with disgust, and even Guido is taken aback. They continue to regard each other in silence until, finally, Cesare scoffs. He says that her eyes must have become too accustomed to shoes to differentiate people. He informs her that he is not a brothel keeper, and she retorts that there is nothing wrong with her eyes, addressing him by his family's name, Bonaparte. Without giving him a break, she starts to tell him that her name is Abele, but then corrects herself, saying her name is Adele Vivi. She asserts that she can play the role better than anyone else. In response, he asks her what exactly she thinks he is looking for. Without blinking, she informs him that she knows he's looking for someone to impersonate a Bonaparte and marry a member of House de la Valle in his stead. He looks at her in surprise and asks whether she heard this from someone. She says no. She merely speculated based on what was written in the papers. Because in the pledge made between the two families, only their surnames are specified, not particular individuals. So if Cesare can find a woman to play the part of Bonaparte's secret daughter, he might be able to escape from his obligation to enter into an arranged marriage. The reason it has to be a woman is that House de la Valle still has one unmarried son. Guido is impressed that their shoe shiner deduced all of that from merely reading the papers. However, Cesare seems cold and calculated. He tells his companion that it's a waste of time because the de la Valle family is composed of scholars, and a shoe shiner who can merely read some words won't be good enough to fool them. The young lady refuses to back down. She mentions to Cesare that she can do more than just read, causing him to halt as his eyes widen in surprise. He asks her if she just spoke Denonese. She replies in the affirmative, informing him that she also speaks Algesian. Guido looks excitedly between the two of them but remains silent. Cesare probes further, asking Adele where she learned the foreign languages. She replies that she read books at the local library and picked them up from foreigners. This time he's impressed and says it feels like the ocean goddess is playing tricks on him. However, he adds that it's quite unfortunate because intelligence only goes so far. Adele would need to be attractive for her to be sold off. He uses his shoe to tap her face, where rough patches are visible, then informs her that she doesn't qualify one bit before getting up to leave. As he begins to walk away, Adele calls out to him to wait. She reaches for her face and rips off the mask that has been mended to her visage, then lets her hair down. When she turns around, her face is as smooth and beautiful as that of the water goddess. She looks Cesare in the eyes and asks him if she qualifies now. Once Cesare and his companion recover from their moment of shock, Guido speaks. He admits he didn't think it was possible for Adele to marry into House de la Valle in place of Cesare. However, he acknowledges that her hair color and even her eye color are similar to Cesare's. He believes she is perfect for the part. Our male lead, Cesare, asks Adele if she is noble-born, to which she replies in the negative. He then asks if her parents are nobles, and she responds that she has been a lifelong orphan. At this point, Cesare decides it's time to be serious. He tells her that he knows she is not foolish enough to be ignorant of the fact that she would die if caught. So why volunteer? In reply, Adele says it is because she is hungry. A look of disgust crosses his face. He mutters in disappointment and turns away. As he walks off, he tells her that he is Cesare, the man who sends her off. In response, she says that they should meet again in the place where they both long for. He is genuinely impressed that she knows the words to Durante's plays, and he smiles. He believes they have found someone quite useful. Before leaving, he instructs her to come to Bonaparte's manor by tomorrow morning. Back in the slums, it's pouring heavily in Gomorrah, and most people seem to still be asleep. Adele is lost in thought. She still can't believe that Cesare Bonaparte accepted her proposition. She is relieved that she wouldn't have to worry about being sold off to a brothel anymore. However, she feels bad that she cannot tell her only friend, Clarissa, about this. She wanted her friend to be the first to know, but she assumes Clarissa must be busy again today. She finally decides she's going to leave a letter for her friend. Suddenly, the door begins to rattle, making her wonder who it could be at this hour. The door continues to rattle, and finally it slams open. The man from the very first scene is back. He claims he decided to check up on Adele and is furious to see her packing up to run away without paying her debts. He begins to stomp toward her, telling her that he is going to sell her off. Furthermore, he reaches her and grabs her arm violently. Our female lead retaliates. She scratches his face, and in the process, drops the letter. Then she scrambles to escape through the window, and the man calls her a crazy bitch as he demands to know where she thinks she is going. He tries to reach for her again, and at that moment, Adele recalls the conversation she had with Cesare when he asked her why she risks her life by getting involved in the plan. As she leaps through the window and falls several feet down to the ground, she thinks to herself that she doesn't care if she dies, as long as she can escape this place. As long as she can get away, she is willing to offer up her life. She picks herself up from the ground and runs toward her freedom. At the Bonaparte Manor, a man is already waiting for Adele. He welcomes her and introduces himself as Ernesto, the butler of the manor. He then asks her to come inside because Cesare awaits her. In Cesare's office, Adele stands before him, drenched to her skin, but he focuses on the work at his desk. When he finally looks up, he tells her that she looks awful. Then he playfully addresses her as his beloved little sister and asks her why she got so drenched on her way home. She looks down and says that there is an old man named Nino who manages all the shoe shiners in the slums. She explains that she is on the run because she owes him protection fees. Before she can complete her story, Cesare interrupts her, stating that the old man is dead, and she looks up at him in shock. He casually notes that it is pouring heavily tonight, and that the rain came down so hard that a house collapsed in Gomorrah. He adds that someone dying in an accident in the slums frequently happens. Without batting an eyelash, he asks Adele if there is anyone else who might get in her way of becoming a member of the House of Bonaparte. She flinches, surprised by the lengths to which this man would go to achieve his goals, including murder. Stuttering, she replies that there is no longer anyone who will be in her way. She thinks to herself that if he knows about Clarissa, she'd be in danger, so she keeps her mouth shut and clenches her fists. Cesare seems to notice her discomfort and assures her that there's no need to fret. He explains that as long as she sticks to the plan, she has nothing to worry about. Now that the old man has been taken care of, he says it's time to get to the main points. Their goal is for her to seduce and marry the son of House Della Valle. He informs her that her body, heart, way of speaking, down to her fingertips and toes, will need to perfectly emulate a Buonaparte, because they will be fooling the entirety of Fornati's high society. Moving on, he mentions to her that she has 3 months to prepare, and if she fails to become a proper lady who meets his standards by then, the plan will be scrapped. Adele thinks to herself that by scrapped, he probably means that if she fails, he would be scrapping her existence as well. Remaining calm, she tells him that she understands. Cesare regards her with calculating eyes and asks why she is not curious about the reason he gave her 3 months. In reply, she mentions that it coincides with his birthday banquet. He tells her she is correct and says he expects nothing less from someone who could deduce his plan from a mere newspaper article. He watches her with cold eyes and comments that it seems as if she knows more about his family than he does. Likewise, he seems to think there must be some other reason, and asks if she is perhaps interested in him. Towering over her, Cesare looks down and says he understands because to a girl like Adele, from the slums and with nothing but a pretty face, he must seem like a savior. So, it's understandable that she might want to cling to him. However, he says he's going to make one thing clear: no coming into his bedroom in the middle of the night. Our shoeshine girl looks up at him without blinking and thanks him for the advice. Then she informs him that she is not interested, though she secretly thinks to herself that he is handsome but crazy. Cesare bursts into laughter and tells her that she should see her face right now. He insists that he is telling her this because it has happened before. However, she coldly replies that she will keep that in mind as she addresses him as Sir. He turns around to look at her and tells her she shouldn't address him as Sir, but as brother, and she corrects herself. Once he walks away and plops down in a seat, he announces that starting today, she will be known as Adelaide Bonaparte. He says she is 5 years younger than him and has spent her whole life across the ocean in Capolo, thinking she was a commoner, but for some inexplicable reason, she ended up coming here to the manor by herself. Adele, now Adelaide, thinks to herself that this must be what he plans to explain to outsiders as her reason for being part of the family. She asks him if the chairwoman is also in on the plan. Cesare replies negatively. He says his dear Madame Eva seems eager to have great-grandchildren and is actually welcoming Lady Lucretia with open arms. Adelaide is surprised to find out that the chairwoman is supporting the arranged marriage. Moving on, our male lead asks if she has any other questions and points out that she hasn't asked about the most important thing yet. When she asks what the most essential thing would be, he says it's about his parents. If Adelaide is going to play the role of his little sister, she has to know about them, so he wonders why she hasn't asked. She thinks to herself that she doubts there's anyone who doesn't know about the rumor that Cesare's parents were so crazy for each other that they left behind both their titles and their young son. She informs him that she heard the rumor about how they left the year he turned 7. He smirks and says he guesses he doesn't have to explain it then. He tells her that they will say his parents did something crazy again and birthed her. He concludes that should be enough for the day. Then he lets her know that a maid is waiting outside for her. Before she leaves, he tries out her new name on his tongue, Adelaide Bonaparte. He hopes that the next time they meet, she will appear more ladylike, and he says he looks forward to seeing her transformation. She turns around and tells him that she will do her best, and she calls him brother. The woman outside the door is named Epony Calere. She introduces herself and announces that she will be Adelaide's personal maid. She claims that it is an honor to serve. Moving on, she shows our female lead to her new quarters and explains that the House of Bonaparte is against extravagance, so it is not as luxurious as it could be. However, she points out that Adelaide should be comfortable here because it is a simple room meant for a young lady. Our female lead is in disbelief, as the room is anything but simple. She starts to call a pony ma'am, but the maid instructs her to speak informally when addressing her. So, she corrects herself and speaks casually. Epony tells her that they will be starting with etiquette lessons right away the next day. She notices Adelaide's clothes and comments that she might catch a cold after being drenched. She asks her to step over to the side so that she can assist her with her bath. Our female lead's face heats up, and she quickly tells her maid that she is fine and can wash by herself. However, the older woman informs her that nobles do not wash their bodies themselves. She adds that it is part of her training and asks her to follow along. Adelaide tries to protest again, but Epony firmly informs her that it is not a request. Finally, she agrees and takes off her clothes. What the maid sees makes her eyes widen in shock. Our shoeshine girl is covered in bruises all over from below her neck. Out of fear, she quickly explains that bruises don't last long. She says she knows this from plenty of experience, and assures Epony that these bruises won't even leave a mark. She looks down sadly and asks her maid if she is going to report this to Lord Cesare. Not only that, but she is worried that he will disqualify her because she is such a mess. However, the older lady tells her that her contract with Cesare will last until she follows through with the marriage. She assures Adelaide that it should be fine as long as she does not get caught by the young master of Della Valle until then. Our female lead breathes out a sigh of relief, and her maid turns away. She informs her that besides those injuries, she is far too skinny. As she prepares her bath, she lets her know that they must focus on allowing her body heal for a while because she is now a part of the House of Bonaparte. Later that night, Cesare asks the maid how his lovely sister is doing. Epony reports to him that her physical health is a concern. She explains how Adelaide was covered in bruises from having been beaten. The young master replies that flawed pearls aren't worth much. However, the maid reassures him that the injuries will heal just fine with enough treatment. She adds that once Adelaide gains a little weight, she will become quite the beauty. This seems to impress Cesare, as he already believes our female lead is beautiful now. He remarks that it is just a shame she will be his sister, causing the maid to flinch in disgust. Sensing her discomfort, he promises not to lay a finger on Adelaide. He then goes ahead to contradict himself by announcing that he intends to have her killed as soon as the pledge is fulfilled. The next morning, Adelaide rises early out of habit, looking out her window. She thinks to herself that it's already time for the ships to come in. When the ships that have been out catching fish all night return to the harbor, some of the fishermen give away the catch that they won't be able to sell. Back when she lived in Gomorrah, she used to go to the harbor every morning, hoping to get some of those fish. But now, she lives such a luxurious life, and she still can't believe it. She wonders if she would really be able to do this. Then, she returns to her bed and reaches for a book. Since she doesn't think she can fall back asleep, she decides to read instead. A knock comes at her door, and Epony walks in. She is surprised to see her already awake and asks if the young lady was uncomfortable at all. Adelaide replies in the negative, explaining that she just happened to wake up early. She then asks her maid what she needs to do starting from today. The older lady is impressed that our female lead is full of enthusiasm. She mentions that things will be incredibly busy from now on, but for now they should start with breakfast. In the dining room, the sight of the arranged table with assorted dishes makes Adelaide's mouth water. As Epony pulls out a seat for her, she asks if there's any kind of food that the young lady likes in particular. Adelaide replies that she prefers not to eat rotten food, but she's fine with anything. Even bugs are okay. Her maid is taken aback by her response and comments that she doesn't seem picky, which is a wonderful quality in a young lady. She then adds that it is essential for a Bonaparte to be familiar with table manners, as they are one of the most basic things to learn. Moving on, Epony instructs Adelaide to start by using the outermost cutlery and teaches her how to straighten her back, tuck in her chin, and avoid placing her elbows on the table or lowering both hands while eating. Adelaide quickly replicates all of this, and her maid is impressed that she learns quickly. She instructs our female lead to take a bite, and when she does, her face heats up with happiness. All the dishes she tries taste absolutely great, and she secretly wants to lick her plate. However, she begins to worry that she has messed up her table manners by eating too hastily, as if she has been starving. But her maid commends her, saying that she is happy to see her eating so well. For the moment, Epony says it would be best for Adelaide to eat at least 4 meals a day. After breakfast, she gives Adelaide a tour of the manor. She shows her the library, the assembly room, the long gallery, the recreation room, the dining room, Cesare's office, and many more. As they continue the tour, Epony informs her that if she is ever called to Cesare's room, she must enter without knocking, as that is one of the rules here. Our female lead asks if there is anything else she should keep in mind, and her maid assumes it is best to tell her this now. She explains that there are a total of 6 people, including herself, who are aware of the plan between Cesare and Adelaide. She adds that in a few days' time, there will be a 7th person, someone who is coming to teach our shoeshine girl proper ladies etiquette. Her name is Madame Flavia. She is very strict, but she is the best in her field. so Epone advises her to do her best to follow Madame Flavia's lead. Adelaide reassures her that she will do her best. However, she asks how she should greet Madame Flavia when she meets her for the first time. Her maid informs her that the Bonapartes are high-ranking nobles who would not greet someone first, but it might be an exception for Lady Flavia. She instructs Adelaide to lift her skirt, keep her back straight, and bend her knees slightly, then bow her head. The young lady demonstrates it with ease, and her maid is thoroughly impressed. She tells her that it was excellent and commends her for being a quick learner. By the end of the day, Epone notifies our female lead that she did very well today. She prays that the ocean goddess watches over her at night and bids her good night. As Adelaide lays in bed, she thinks about how quiet it is, and that the noises that rang out every day in the slums are not audible here at all. She had no idea that life could be this peaceful. As she drifts off to sleep, a teardrop escapes her eyes. For some, eating warm food and falling asleep surrounded by silence is completely normal. Hours later, she hears a voice from afar, urging her to run away. As her eyes snap open, her door immediately follows suit and slams open. Epone rushes in and claims there's an emergency. She tells Adelaide that she must get ready at once. She hurriedly explains that Madame Flavia has come to the manor unannounced. Epone insists that there's no time to waste, urging Adelaide to get dressed immediately. However, our female lead has only just woken up and is still very sleepy. She moves sluggishly, complaining that it's still too early. Suddenly, the door slams open again. Turning to see the newcomer, Adelaide is met with the sight of her teacher in all her strict glory. Lady Flavia, a descendant of a noble household that has served the Bonapartes for generations, is a member of the prestigious Loredani family. Among all the members of her household, Flavia Loredani is particularly well known within high society. Not only is she renowned for her beauty and elegance, akin to a work of art, but she is also notorious for her fiery temper, particularly concerning the young ladies under her tutelage. Presently, Adelaide and her maid have gotten up to greet Lady Flavia, but the woman looks furious. With a voice dripping in venom, she calls our young lady filthy, questioning how she could dare to present herself in such a manner. Adelaide flinches at the harshness of her tone, utterly taken aback. She quickly apologizes, but Lady Flavia interrupts, demanding to know who granted her the permission to respond. Bowing her head in submission, Adelaide is met with Lady Flavia's correction. The madam asserts that it seems impossible to teach anything to someone so vulgar, claiming that Adelaide is devoid of any manners. At that moment, a voice cuts through the tension from the doorway. It's Cesare. He states that he would not have summoned Lady Flavia had his sister already been adequately instructed in manners. He points out that she has arrived earlier than anticipated, prompting Lady Flavia to turn and greet him. Addressing him as Your Grace, she explains that she was just about to come and see him about the situation involving Adelaide. Before she can finish her sentence, Cesare leans forward and plants a quick kiss on her cheek, greeting her warmly. He expresses relief that she slept well the previous night, and then invites her to join him for lunch. However, he adds with a teasing tone that he is uncertain whether she will have the time for it. Lady Flavia insists that she could never turn down an invitation from him, her frustration evident as she slaps her forehead, trying to find the right word to use when referring to him. He playfully suggests that the word she's searching for is handsome, to which she replies that he is far too suave. Cesare, with a charming smile, quips that it's no wonder the ladies won't leave him alone. It is then that he seems to notice Adelaide for the first time. He playfully asks her if she's getting ready for a bath, and he expresses regret for not arriving earlier. Lady Flavia becomes flustered and rebukes him, cautioning that he mustn't say such things. She indignantly asserts that Adelaide, being a lowly creature, might begin to harbor delusions about Cesare. However, Cesare retorts that Adelaide appears entirely uninterested, lamenting that it strikes a blow to his ego. This revelation takes Lady Flavia by surprise, and she accuses Adelaide of having high standards. In a fit of anger, she strides over to Adelaide and yanks on the sleeve of her robe, exposing the bruises on our female lead's arms. She gasps at the sight, demanding to know the origin of the nasty bruises. Quickly, Adelaide covers herself, insisting that it is nothing. They will heal soon and leave no marks. She adds with a shaky voice that these injuries will not impact their plan in any way. However, Lady Flavia is far from appeased. She turns to Cesare, declaring that the girl will not do. She claims there's no way of knowing where Adelaide has been loitering about, hastily assuming that the young lady must have been engaging in unsavory activities. Perhaps selling her body and suffering at the hands of drunkards, which explains the bruises. Not only that, but she calls Adelaide the lowest of the low, and a lazy vagabond with no perseverance whatsoever, her voice laced with scorn. Furthermore, she furiously adds that even if Cesare were to keep Adelaide for 100 years, she could never hope to mimic any semblance of nobility. Likewise, She seems convinced that the only reason our female lead is present is to scheme for a rise in social status through this marriage. At that moment, a disturbing flashback grips Adelaide, dragging her back to the dark slums where she endured unspeakable hardships. She recalls the various men who would beat and slap her around while she shined their shoes, a painful recollection that sends her fists clenching in anger. With determination in her voice, she apologizes to Lady Flavia, promising to do her best. Yet, it only causes the woman's outrage to erupt as she shouts that Adelaide's best will never be enough. She asks our shoeshine girls if she honestly believes that she can pull the wool over anyone's eyes, convincing them that she is anything more than a beggar through hard work. She asks her if she thinks for a moment she can deceive the righteous eyes of those born into high society, surrounded by nobility their entire lives. Likewise, she concludes by calling Adelaide an arrogant little fool. Her disdain for our female lead is obvious. She tells Adelaide, "Never forget that she has lived in the gutter your whole life." Maintaining a cool composure, our female lead responds that since the day she was born, she has had neither parents nor the opportunity to learn, so she does not know if it's possible. After a brief pause, she adds that her brother Cesare believes it is possible, else he wouldn't have brought her here otherwise. This statement seems to put Lady Flavia in a precarious position. She growls in anger but finds herself momentarily at a loss for words. However, Adelaide is not done. She presses on, stating that if Lady Flavia deems the entire premise flawed, she should take it up with her brother instead. The room grows heavy with tension and unspoken challenges. Adelaide concludes by saying that if she has offended the Madame because she isn't very knowledgeable about noble etiquette, she hopes to be forgiven. Lady Flavia tries to think of a comeback but can't find one. She flushes with embarrassment and turns away, finally saying she has to leave because she forgot about a previous appointment. She hurries out the door, slamming it behind her. Cesare breaks the tension and tells Adelaide that she handled it pretty well, and she thanks him. She wonders if he noticed her bruises. He informs her that she's not good at adapting to situations, implying that Madame Flavia will definitely have her hands full. He adds that things would have been easier if Adelaide had been more subservient, claiming the Madame is actually kinder than she seems. Our female lead asks if he suggests she should act pitiful, and he replies that it wouldn't be an act because she really is pitiful. He says she's lived her whole life that way, and it's strange for her to think otherwise. Furthermore, he tells her to treat it like a play, knowing that she understands it's the smart thing to do. Then he smiles in a way that feels sinister. Adelaide realizes he's just trying to get a rise out of her, and she would rather not become someone's toy. She knows it's a challenge to her to see how she will respond, so instead she bows lower, saying she'll work hard to meet his expectations. Cesare looks at her coldly and starts to walk away, saying everyone gets boring quickly. The next day, Adelaide is fully dressed and waiting with her handmaid, a pony. She's a bit worried. She wonders if Madame Flavia will really come back to teach her. A pony reassures her that whatever Cesare wants always happens. When she opens the grand doors, Madame Flavia is waiting. She tries out the new name, addressing her as Adelaide Bonaparte. However, she says that someone like our female lead could never deserve a name like Bonaparte. The strict woman claims that the great blue star on Adelaide's chest is enough to anger the ocean goddess. She mentions that Cesare asked her to turn our shoeshine girl into a young lady, but it looks like she needs a different kind of lesson first. She tells Adelaide to kneel, which surprises her. When the Madame repeats the command, Adelaide gets upset. She can't understand why the woman hates her so much. She thinks it might be because she comes from a low status or because she's a dirty shoeshiner, or maybe just because the woman wants to hurt her. Deciding that if hurting her is the goal, the Madame is going about it the wrong way because a shoeshiner's knees are worthless. Adelaide lifts her dress and gracefully kneels. Madame Flavia moves closer and tells her to listen carefully, then stomps on her leg. She calls her nothing but a commodity and digs the heel of her shoe into Adelaide's soft skin. The Madame says that all our female lead would have to do is get sold to House Della Valle, and if she ever thinks of something else, she'll be fed to the sharks. She presses harder, making Adelaide flinch, but she stays on her knees as the Madame tells her to know her place. Finally, Madame Flavia asks her to get up so they can start lessons. She says they'll begin with good posture and proper walking etiquette. She brings a pony forward, who presents a pair of heels for Adelaide to wear to correct her awkward stance. Madame Flavia instructs her to wear the shoes everywhere, even outside their lessons. Adelaide's cheeks flush when she sees the new shoes, but her excitement fades as she realizes they're far too small. When she tries to explain this, the Madame tells her to get up and stand in the shoes with a sinister grin. She orders her to practice walking back and forth, telling her not to stop until she says so. The cruel Madame Flavia concocts a fake scenario in her mind. She imagines a moment where Adelaide falls to the floor and throws a tantrum, declaring that she can no longer continue with the lessons. In her imagined scene, she feels justified in chastising Adelaide for such a disruptive display, reprimanding her for lacking any real intention of learning. In her mind, she denounces Adelaide as unworthy of becoming a Bonaparte. This false narrative serves to fuel Madame Flavia's desire to verbally berate the young lady, like kicking about a vagabond. Despite her vivid imagination, the reality is far different. Even after hours of pacing back and forth in those absurdly small shoes, Adelaide has shown unwavering resilience. Madame Flavia believes this tenacity stems from Adelaide's impoverished upbringing and decides that this cannot go on any longer. As Adelaide continues her walking routine, she inquires if she should undertake another round. Frustrated, Madame Flavia commands her maid, Epone, to leave them alone for a moment. However, the maid apologetically informs the madame that the master of the house has instructed her not to leave Adelaide's side. Madame Flavia insists she will explain the matter to Cesare and reassures Epone that she has no intention of punishing the young lady. She implores the maid to depart in the name of House Loredani. Epone bows in response, indicating her understanding, and exits the room. The moment Epone is gone, Madame Flavia turns to Adelaide and addresses her as Shoeshine Girl. She forewarns that she will be direct, asking Adelaide to leave the manor. Our female lead responds with a measured tone, expressing that she does not believe this is truly the desire of the person who brought her here personally. In frustration, Madame Flavia clarifies her meaning. While the Della Valle family may not rank as highly as the Bonapartes, they are evidently superior to someone as indolent and lowly as Adelaide. She asserts that given Adelaide's awareness of her social standing, she ought to step down voluntarily. She further adds that the Loredani family would ensure her safety and grant her generous compensation. In retort, Adelaide proclaims that it appears Madame Flavia wishes for Cesare to marry Lady Lucrezia. She admits she had assumed the older lady's presence was intended to support Cesare in his plans, but it has become clear that this is not the case. She apologizes and states her intent to inform her brother of the development. However, Madame Flavia hastily interrupts, explaining that it is Madame Eva's will, reflecting the desires of the chairwoman. The promise forged between the Della Valle and Bonaparte houses is old-fashioned, yet without it, they doubt Cesare would ever marry. His grandmother is tired of his immature behavior and stresses the importance of settling down soon because it would be unacceptable for such a prestigious noble family to risk extinction with Cesare. Madame Flavia then inquires if Adelaide understands the gravity of the situation, emphasizing that she has stepped into something she cannot possibly manage. As much as Madame Flavia wishes to impress upon her the seriousness of the matter, Adelaide bows with humility and expresses her gratitude. However, she firmly states that she cannot comply with the madame's demands. The older lady, now frustrated, calls her a selfish girl and accuses her of attempting to extort more money from her. However, our female lead calmly explains that this is not her intent. She conveys that she genuinely enjoys the food she receives while living in the mansion. This statement only serves to anger Madame Flavia further. Adelaide continues, stating that money and a future are mere luxuries for someone like her, who struggles to make ends meet day by day. She views the promise of a better future as nothing but a mirage, far less tempting than the immediate satisfaction of a warm meal placed before her. Madame Flavia tells her not to speak as if she takes pride in being driven by hunger, claiming it renders Adelaide no better than an animal. To this, Adelaide surprisingly agrees, saying that her current life is a direct result of her circumstances. She shares that she has gone to bed hungry many nights and has managed to survive on stale bread for an entire month. Living in a world where her next meal is never guaranteed has shaped her perspective, and she declares that she has said all she needs to say. She apologizes once more and points out that regardless of the number of demands placed upon her, she will not leave the Buonaparte manor. She concludes with a graceful bow. As Madame Flavia departs, she reflects on the dire situation. While she notes that Adelaide's awkwardness adds to her unique charm, creating an unusual impression, especially as she walks in those tiny shoes, she cannot shake the growing sense of unease. Despite her irritation, Madame Flavia begins to ponder the absurdity of her situation. The more she thinks about it, the more she can envision a scenario where Cesare ends up with this shoeshine girl. Determined, she resolves to find a different course of action urgently. It has been 1 week since Adelaide began taking Madame Flavia's lessons, and time has slipped by so quickly that she has lost track of the days. Enunciation, etiquette, high society speech, how to converse with a lady of higher standing, how to elegantly refuse a gentleman's invitation, and how to walk properly. Each lesson has created an absolute blur of activities. As she walks now in her extremely tight shoes, her feet throb painfully, yet she maintains her composure, determined not to show any signs of discomfort. As they stroll through the garden, Epony, her ever-observant maid, glances at her with concern and asks if her feet are all right. Adelaide replies that they are fine, but Epony knows better. A hint of sadness crosses her face as she tells Adelaide that she is certain Madame Flavia knows that her walk is already perfect. She informs her that she has been learning at an unbelievable pace. It's as if Adelaide is a sponge, absorbing every bit of knowledge. While she admits that the young lady will still need some practice, she mentions that Adelaide has come so far already that no one would ever suspect she is of lower class. During their conversation, they hear the laughter of some women nearby. Curious, Adelaide asks Epony who those young ladies are, since she doesn't think she has seen them before. Epony quickly realizes that Adelaide must not have heard the latest gossip while she's been busy with her lessons. She brings her up to date and explains that they are young ladies of the Orcanina delegation. When Adelaide inquires about what brings the delegation to the manor, Epony fills her in. A few days ago, the second prince of Orcanina ascended to the imperial throne. He had no support otherwise, but it was made possible by none other than Master Bonaparte. It took a great deal of effort, but eventually his will was accomplished. Now that the prince is emperor, he has sent Master Bonaparte a lavish gift to express his gratitude. That is why there has been such a commotion lately. Adelaide furrows her brow at this news. She says that her brother's influence seems to be growing because he played a significant part in placing someone on the throne of their neighboring empire. Epony nods in agreement, a glint of admiration in her eyes, as they continue to observe the group of ladies, who are now gushing over Cesare. From their vantage point, they see him greet the ladies with a flirtatious smile, but to Adelaide's trained eye, he doesn't appear to be genuinely enjoying the attention. She feels a strange emptiness radiating from him, so she quickly suggests to Epony that they should leave before they draw attention to themselves. As they turn to walk away, Cesare's gaze catches sight of them, and he momentarily seems distracted. One of the ladies notices his attention is divided and asks if he has seen something over there. With a charming smirk, he replies that he must have imagined seeing a mermaid. The lady's interest piques, but Cesare swiftly covers her eyes with his hand, playfully stating that he supposes there is indeed a mermaid with him. The pink flush spreading across the lady's cheeks speaks volumes as she tells him to stop teasing her. Cesare, ever the charming rogue, asks if she would like him to cease his teasing, and adds that he would be waiting for her in his bedroom that night if she wishes to visit again. The lady, with a mixture of hopeful excitement and resolve, replies that she would only come to see him again if he promises to treat her seriously this time. As Cesare pastes a smile on his face, inwardly he feels a growing tedium. He wonders why these women persist in attaching meaning to a simple one-night stand. The blonde hair that had caught his interest earlier suddenly seems dull and unappealing. Outwardly, he continues to smile at her, but his thoughts plunge into darker waters. He tells her she is cute but shameless, then turns away. Rather than responding to her anger, he simply assures her to be safe as he walks off, leaving her seething with hurt and anger. Her friends gather around her, seeking to comfort her, as he strides away, thoroughly bored by the entire encounter. As he lights a cigar, Cesare continues on his path, searching for Adelaide. He is certain she must be nearby. Suddenly, he hears a scream breaking through the peaceful atmosphere. A voice calls out, asking to be let go. He looks up and, a few feet away, sees Adelaide, drenched from head to toe in a fountain. She's struggling to free her arm from the grip of a young man. Let's rewind a bit. Adelaide is walking with Epony while wearing those tiny shoes. They have just left Cesare and his companions. After a while, her throbbing feet have had enough, and she can't walk anymore. Her legs give out and she falls to her knees. Epony realizes it's too much and has to check Adelaide's feet right away. When she takes off the shoes, she sees that Adelaide's feet are badly blistered. Epony is shocked and says it's impossible for her to walk like this. But Adelaide insists she can use a numbing agent and just needs to tough it out a little longer. Epony responds that it's time to stop for the day and says she'll get a wheelchair to help Adelaide. Before leaving, she urges Adelaide to soak her feet while she waits and promises to be back soon. As Adelaide waits alone, soaking her feet in the fountain, the cold water helps ease the pain. She admits it's been tough, but it's nothing compared to her life in Gomorrah, the slums. While she waits, she hears laughter and voices. A group of noblemen is passing by, and when she realizes they're coming her way, she decides to hide. As the men converse, one of the guys comments that they haven't seen Lady Lucrezia today, assuming she would be here with Cesare. His friend responds that Lord Della Valle told Lucrezia to take some time to think about her actions. The first guy thinks it's about time she finishes with that. As the men chat and get closer to the fountain, Adelaide hides quietly and waits for them to pass. She decides to peek out to see if they are gone when one of them surprises her from behind. He seems amused to find her hiding there and grabs her, calling his friends over to check it out. He yanks her forward and she falls out of the fountain, her blistered feet exposed. One friend calls the first guy Enrico and tells him he's going too far. Enrico insists he didn't push her. She fell on her own. While Adelaide coughs and splutters to get the water out of her lungs, the men turn their attention back to her. Enrico jokes that he must have caught a mermaid, not a woman. He questions who she is, pointing out that since she has no shoes, she can't be a noblewoman. However, he notes her fancy clothes are too elaborate for a mere maid. He demands an answer from her and threatens to punish her if she doesn't respond. When she stays quiet, he pulls her closer and asks if she wants that. One of his friends tells him to stop, reminding him they're at the Bonaparte Manor. Enrico gets angry, asking if he needs Cesare's permission to touch the maid. His friends urge him to calm down, saying he's overreacting, but Enrico continues to fume, suggesting he might as well call Cesare King. Finally, Adelaide speaks up, telling him that if he pulls her any harder, he might just pull her arm right off. One of the men points out that she sounds like a noblewoman. Adelaide urges Enrico to let go or he'd regret it. Now the three men are intrigued. Enrico says she's beautiful and wonders who she is, guessing she might be a tutor. But then he adds that her struggle makes him think she's a prostitute who snuck in. His friend starts to agree with him, and Enrico smirks, saying she's got all the clients she requires right here. They look down at her, drenched in the fountain, and start laughing. This infuriates Adelaide, and she screams at Enrico to let her go. He calls her a little brat, then grins wickedly, saying he doesn't know what she thought she would gain by sneaking in, but suggests she might as well entertain him while he's being nice. Just then, Cesare shows up. The three men turn to him, calling him, "Your Grace." He replies with a sly smile, asking if there's someone here worthy of that title, mentioning he overheard Enrico calling him Bastard Cesare. Enrico glares back but doesn't respond. Cesare continues, saying, "Lord Pecci, Enrico's father, will be pleased to hear about this confrontation, especially since the old man has been visiting a lot, dragging his elderly body there to beg for coins." Cesare mentions how he even brought his wife to gain sympathy, which makes Enrico furious. Enrico tries to charge at Cesare, but his friends hold him back, telling him to calm down. One of them warns Cesare he's going too far, but Cesare replies that they went too far by treating his sister like a prostitute. The men all do a double take. They cannot believe that Adelaide is Cesare's sister. He tells them her name, removes his coat, and wraps it around her. He then asks her what happened. She glances briefly at the men before asking him what brings him here. She addresses him as brother, and Enrico shouts that she is lying. He claims that the whole ocean knows that Cesare does not have any siblings. However, our male lead replies calmly that he had thought so too, but it turns out that he does. He mentions that his parents still seem to be infatuated with each other and that he doesn't really need to explain himself. Enrico insists that it wasn't entirely his fault, and that no one would have expected a noblewoman to be in such a state, given that she is barefoot and her feet are covered in blisters. Adelaide apologizes, explaining that she had been practicing so much to avoid bringing shame to House Bonaparte that her feet became wounded in the process. Furthermore, she states that she had asked her maid to fetch help because it was difficult to walk, but she never expected such a terrible thing would happen here on their manor grounds. Cesare lifts her up and carries her, telling her not to overexert herself like that. He mentions that their reputation is not worth her hurting herself trying to preserve it. Adelaide replies that if she were to become a laughingstock in high society, she would be a burden. Cesare reassures her that they are family and that she shouldn't say such things, then kisses her forehead. The word resonates in Adelaide's mind. Family. She has never heard anyone refer to themselves as her family, even as a joke. She wonders if this is how nobles act toward their family members and tries to think of a ladylike response to this warm treatment. Finally, she settles on thanking him. The other men watch in astonishment. Enrico can't seem to wrap his head around the fact that Cesare has a sister, and his companions point out that they look alike. Finally, the male lead turns to face them. He asks if they wanted to have some fun with his sister, and they all step back in fear, insisting that it was only a harmless joke. They claim they had no idea that Adelaide is related to Cesare. He asks them if they're saying it would have been acceptable to act the way they did if she weren't his sister. The men stutter and cast about for an answer, finally settling on saying that it was an honest mistake. Cesare tells them that there's no need to be worried, but he knows who their family is, and he intends to harass them all the same. He says it should be considered an honest mistake, and he hopes they will forgive him when the time comes. With that, he walks away, carrying Adelaide in his arms, and she looks away in discomfort. He asks her what the issue is and tells her to hang on a little longer because they are almost at their destination. The moment they get indoors, Cesare glares at her. He asks if he should have to do such things. Adelaide apologizes, saying she will get down. The moment her feet touch the ground, she crashes to her knees. Cesare looks at her with an amused expression on his face and calls her pathetic. He asks where her maid is, and she explains that Epone had gone to fetch a wheelchair because she cannot walk. The male lead says he does not believe this is what he ordered. He didn't hire a damsel with a limp who can't even stand on her own. Adelaide apologizes, saying that she didn't think she would run into anyone, and he stomps on her feet aggressively. He asks her if this sort of thing turns her on, if she enjoys being assaulted by several men at once, if it's something she learned from the streets, if she does not care as long as it's some big, strong man. As he gets angrier, he presses the sole of his shoe on her blistered feet and asks her why else she would allow those bastards to act like such utter fools on Bonaparte grounds. Adelaide clenches her teeth. She asks Cesare if he's implying that she has seduced those men intentionally. He coldly tells her that she's the only one who would know the answer to that. Turning around to look at him, she asserts that she did not seduce those men, and he bursts into mocking laughter. He mentions that he has heard how Madame Flavia has been nasty to her. Then he presses his shoes harder against her blistered foot and asks her why she couldn't deal with that little old lady on her own because there are clearly many ways to handle her, whether by intimidating her or others. Finally, he stops laughing and looks at her coldly, stating that she's good at letting go of her pride and begging. He asks her why she lets things get this bad instead of doing what she does best. As she remains motionless on the floor, angry tears gather in the corners of her eyes, and she apologizes. She admits she is to blame for all of this, and Cesare comments that it's a good thing she is aware of that. He finally removes his shoes from her blistered foot, leaving shoe prints all over her skin. He instructs her to ensure that her wounds don't leave any scars. Just then, Epone swings the door open and arrives. She calls out to Cesare with concern and begins to say something, but he cuts her off. He tells her that he will hear her explanation later, and then instructs her to allow Adelaide to take a break from lessons for the next 3 days. Afterward, he slams the door behind him, leaving Epone standing and looking at Adelaide, who is curled up on the floor. When Cesare returns to his office, he smokes a cigar as he stares at a picture of Enrico. He's unimpressed to discover that the man is the second son, who won't even inherit the family title and lacks the skills to live independently. Cesare becomes infuriated that someone so pathetic was making a fuss in the Bonaparte Manor gardens. He scoffs, stating that Enrico ought to know his place. He decides he will handle this properly. As he walks around, he feels that his plans have gone awry because Adelaide was unintentionally introduced to the world, which means it is now impossible to use someone else in her place. He would have to make that shoeshine girl turn into a Bonaparte at all costs. He thinks that she certainly looks provocative. Her dark green hair glistens like kelp, soaked in ocean waves. Her skin is as pale as salt, and her needlessly large bosom are all fine attributes. He assumes that those pieces of trash nobles from earlier must be getting aroused at the thought of Adelaide right about now. He even admits to himself that perhaps he was a little aroused at that moment too. Then he smirks, deciding that if she affects him this much, the plan will succeed as soon as Esdra della Valle lays eyes on Adelaide. A knock comes at his door, and he tells the person to enter. It is Lady Flavia. She prays that the goddess's peace be with him, and he looks at her without replying. She seems to notice the tension in the air and flinches when he addresses her. Cesare says he won't blame her for disciplining the girl, but he would prefer not to have to get involved so much. She hurriedly apologizes, and Cesare tells her to ensure she never bothers him again. He expresses confidence that she will be good enough to understand what he means, and then dismisses her from his office. The moment she is outside, her face takes on an angry expression. She admits that she must have polished that shoeshine girl a bit too hard, but she ought to have cut corners. She believes that Adelaide most certainly tortured herself on purpose until her feet were in such a state. Furthermore, she secretly curses our female lead and calls her a cunning fox. Now, because of Adelaide, Madame Flavia believes she has lost favor with Cesare. We see some high society women gossiping. They talk about Cesare and the rumor about him taking a lover. One of the women says she heard that the lover was barefoot, and her companion responds that it is impossible for such a man to stoop so low as to associate with a commoner. The First Lady believes that it is possible that the Duke's preferences have changed. Whatever it is, she strongly suspects that there is definitely something going on between them. She proceeds to add that she heard they had gone into the inner palace together and that Cesare was very sweet to the woman, which is unlike him. Now, her companion is genuinely taken aback. She admits that she never thought Cesare would bring any woman into the inner palace, and both women wonder who on earth the mysterious lady in question could be. Suddenly, a redhead springs up, and the ladies look at her in surprise. Her name is Ginevra, and she announces that she is not feeling well, so she must take her leave now. Her companions tell her to be careful and pray that the ocean goddess is with her. As she rushes away, they gossip among themselves that she seemed quite well until a minute ago. It's obvious where she is going. As Ginevra continues on her way, she thinks to herself that the situation is terrible and that she must let Lady Lucretia know about this at once. She rushes to her study and begins to scribble on a piece of paper, writing a letter. In the letter, Ginevra states that autumn has arrived in Fernazzi and that it is nearly the end of Lucrezia's period of self-reflection. However, it seems that dark clouds are obscuring the future. Just today, according to the young noblewomen gathered at the Bonaparte Manor for the unveiling of the Mermaid's Heart, Duke Bonaparte was seen carrying an unknown woman in his arms and heading into the inner palace. How much more must he stomp on her dear friend's heart until he is satisfied? Moreover, what kind of unchaste young woman would seduce him? Ginevra writes that she wishes to meet with her friend as soon as possible to comfort her in her misery. Subsequently, she seals the letter and hands it over to a messenger to deliver it to the Della Valle residence immediately. It is nighttime when a woman receives the letter. She reads through it in front of a fireplace and tosses it into the fire after she is done. She bristles with anger at Cesare, wondering what kind of utter nonsense this is. She is none other than Lady Lucrezia della Valle. Enjoying this so far? Comment Society for Part 2. Until next time, ciao!